And we'll begin with some prayers, reciting some prayers to get into a good state of mind. And then we'll also do a little bit of meditation on something from last week's class. So, while reciting the prayers, if you want, if you can, it can help to imagine that the Buddha is in front of you. You're directing your prayers, the prayers to the Buddha, seeing the Buddha as someone with really wonderful qualities, excellent qualities that you would like to emulate, and take him as the guide for the way you live your life. Put yourself under his compassionate care and guidance. And doing this, not just for your own sake, your own happiness and well-being, but for the benefit of others, to be able to help all other beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. Reverently I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of all others to the great enlightenment. Then we offer the whole universe containing everything beautiful and pleasing and enjoyable, precious, and imagine it as a pure land, and then offer it to the Buddha and wish that all living beings be able to experience the Pure Land. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this Pure Land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryatayami. And then we'll recite the mantra of the Buddha 3 times while visualizing light flowing from the Buddha into yourself, filling your body and mind completely, clearing away negative thoughts, negative energy, negative karma, and any other kind of problems like sickness or pain, imagine those being dispelled, and your mind is blessed to be able to attain the same qualities and realizations the Buddha has in his mind. Taya ta om mone mone maha mane soha. Taya ta om mone mone maha mane soha. Taya ta om mone mone maha mane soha. Okay, so just sit quietly for a few moments to make sure that you are comfortable, relaxed, not tense or tight, agitated. And also that your mind is in the present, not somewhere else, the past or the future or another place. Letting the mind rest on the breathing is helpful to do that. Just be aware of the breath coming in, going out. It's a good way to settle down the mind. So let's do a little contemplation about one of the points that we looked at last week. So last week in our class, we were looking at the causes of suffering, in particular the delusions. And so we looked at a couple of the delusions and also at their disadvantages, like why Buddhism says it's harmful to have these delusions in our mind. So one of the disadvantages of delusions is that they disturb our mind. That's like an immediate effect. As soon as a delusion pops up in our mind gets disturbed, ruffled. It's not peaceful. So see if you can recall some experience that you had where you may have been feeling quite calm and relaxed, maybe even happy. And then all of a sudden something happens. Somebody said something or did something that triggered anger. You got angry. So see if you can remember that. And see if you can recognize that when that happens, when anger pops up in your mind is no longer peaceful and happy, but is agitated and unhappy. And we may have the tendency to blame the other person. Like we think, or we say, they made me angry. It's their fault. But according to Buddhism, if we didn't have the seed of anger in our mind, we wouldn't get angry, no matter what anybody said or did. So in reality, nobody can make us angry. They may do something that triggers our anger, and then anger pops up in our mind. But that happens because we have the seed or the potential of anger within our mind. We haven't eliminated that, purified that from our mind. Also, it's not realistic to think that we can go through life, never encounter any annoying or difficult people or situations. However, if we learn how to work on our mind, learn how to manage anger and other disturbing emotions, then eventually be free of it altogether, then we'll reach the state where we're free forever from that disturbing mental state. No matter what happens, what situation we encounter, we will no longer experience that disturbing mental state. Let's see if that sounds like something you would like to do. Okay, so tonight we'll look at some ways that we can start working on our mind and learn how to manage our delusions and reduce the incidence of them arising in our mind. And so this is something really practical, very, very practical, very useful for our mind and our life. So we'll start by looking at these 6 factors that cause delusions to arise. So I had hoped to talk about them last week, but we ran out of time, so we do them tonight. So last week we looked at the causes of suffering. So that's talking about the second noble truth. The first noble truth is suffering, the different kinds of problems and difficulties we have. And then the second noble truth is the causes of suffering, which are mainly karma and delusions, also known as afflictions or disturbing emotions. And so these lie behind our karma, our actions, the actions that we do that lead to suffering. And so it said that these are the most important thing to work on. These are the main cause of suffering. And so we need to understand them and figure out how to work on them. So my guess is we don't really like it when a delusion like anger comes up in our mind, because our mind gets disturbed, and they can also disturb other aspects of our life, like our relationships. So, sorry. So why do they come up? It's like we don't really want them to be there in our mind, but they come up. So why is that? And so in Buddhism, they talk a lot about causes and conditions, all impermanent phenomena, which are all the things that we deal with in our life, like our body and our mind and all the things in the world around us. These are all impermanent phenomena. And one of the characteristics of impermanent phenomena is that they come into existence depending on causes and conditions. So they're not there forever, but they come into existence, and they do so due to causes and conditions. So there's a lot of discussion in Buddhism about how things depend on causes and conditions. And if we can understand what are the causes and conditions behind something that we'd like to get rid of, then we can get rid of it by getting rid of the causes and conditions. And so there's this explanation of these 6 factors that are like causes and conditions for delusions to arise in our mind. And one of the handouts from last week was a talk that Lama Yeshe gave on this subject. And so we'll look at them. I'll go through them one by one and explain them. There's also another book that came out recently, well, in the last few years, called Samsara, Nirvana, and Buddha Nature by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Thupten Chodron. And this book also contains an explanation of these 6 factors. And in that book, the Dalai Lama says, some people assert that afflictions, i.e. delusions, are an inherent part of human nature, and as such are hardwired in our nervous system or genes. So this is a view that scientists and psychologists have, and it's maybe something you have learned as well, that human beings are just hardwired to experience anger and desire and jealousy and so on. And this is just our makeup, and there's not much we can do about it. And according to this view, although we may be able to modify the effects of these afflictions, we can never be free from them. But from a Buddhist point of view, this is a narrow view of human potential that offers little hope for the improvement of humanity. Yeah, so to think that human beings are sort of doomed to always have these disturbing emotions like anger, and we can never completely free ourselves from them is kind of, not a very hopeful situation. The Buddhist view is that although coarse levels of consciousness and the brain are interdependent, they are not the same nature. Okay, so there's a connection between our mind and our brain, but they're not one and the same. And so the subtlest minds are not bound by the physical limitations of our bodies and brains. In addition, as conscious phenomena, afflictions can be eliminated from the mind stream by applying their counter forces. They are not our inherent nature, and liberation from afflictions is possible, as demonstrated by many highly realized practitioners throughout history. So this is something you can think about, investigate for yourself. You think that afflictions like anger and desire and so on are permanent fixtures within us and can never be eliminated completely. We'll always have them. According to Buddhism, that isn't the case. We can be free of them. Buddha himself did so, and many others since the Buddha's time have done that as well. So yeah, it's important to accept that that is possible. That is a possibility, because then we will try to achieve it. We will work on our mind and, try to achieve this freedom from disturbing emotions. But if we think it's impossible, we may not even try. Okay, so let's look at these 6 factors. The first one is called basis or foundation, and this refers to seeds or latencies of delusions in our mind stream left by previous negative actions and previous experiences of that delusion. So this is the main cause. When an affliction like anger comes up in our mind, the main cause is a seed. We have a seed of anger in our mind. This isn't a physical seed like a flower seed, but the word seed is used. It's just something there in the mind that can arise as an experience of anger when other conditions come together. And so it's kind of similar, like, in the case of ordinary seeds, like flower seeds, vegetable seeds, and so on. So we know that they require various causes and conditions. If you have a package of tomato seeds, for example, and you just leave it there on the table, expecting that it's going to grow into a tomato plant and make tomatoes, that's not realistic. You have to put it in soil, add water. It needs heat and sunlight and so on in order to grow and become tomatoes. So it's similar with our mind. We have the seeds of delusions in our mind, seeds of anger, seeds of attachment, and so on. But for them to arise in the form of those experiences, being angry and so on, we need these other conditions. Okay, so one is the second factor here is the object. Number 2 is the object. So there's always an object. Whenever we get angry, whenever we have desire, or whatever afflictive state of mind, there's always an object. It could be a person, it could be something inanimate, it could also just be something in our mind, something we think of or remember or fantasize. So there's always some object that triggers the delusion. And then number 3 is society, and this refers to the influence of other people, especially those with unwholesome habits. And so we're easily affected by the people we spend time with. So for example, if we spend time with people who have a lot of anger, animosity, they're often getting angry, expressing their anger, acting out their anger, then we'll probably find ourselves being more angry. Yeah. And so that's why, like in, Buddhism, we say that if you want to follow the spiritual path, it's really good to have spiritual friends, spend time with spiritual teachers and also spiritual friends who are trying to work on their mind, who are trying to be more kind and more patient and more compassionate and less angry and selfish and so on. So if we spend time with people who have those positive qualities, then we'll become more like that ourselves. So I'm sure you can see that in your experience, the kind of people you hang out with, spend time with, talk with, and so on, can easily influence you, affect you. The 4th is it's called discussions here. So this includes a lot of different things. Generally, it's like sources of information, different ways that information can come into us. So reading books, reading magazines, reading newspapers, watching TV, movies, and internet, social media, and so on, listening to lectures, or just having conversations with people. So through these means, then our delusions can arise, or they can be triggered. So I think it's kind of well known that if people watch a lot of movies with violence, and there's a lot of violent movies with violence, or computer games, different kinds of games that people play with computers, they also are very violent. And so if you spend time watching those things, playing those games and so on, you'll probably have more violent thoughts coming up in your mind. Yeah. So this is one area we can start working. If we wish to reduce our delusions, then to pay attention to the kind of media we are involved with, the kind of things we are reading, listening to, watching, those sources of information coming in. And if we notice that, certain websites, certain TV programs, certain movies, certain books trigger our afflictions, then we try to stay away from them, reduce them as much as we can. And because they can be very, very powerful. I read an article written by one woman who often went to retreats, Vipassana retreats, 10-day Vipassana retreats. And one time she was on her way to a retreat, and I think she had to take an airplane. And in the airport, she wanted something to read on the plane. So she picked up a novel that she saw in the bookstore, and I guess it was written by a reputable writer. She thought, oh, this looks good. And she started reading it on the plane. And it was about cannibals. It was about teenage cannibals, teenage girls who would kill somebody and then eat them. And she said, she felt like horrified at first, but she just kept reading and eventually finished the whole book. And she really regretted that she did that afterwards, because when she went to this Vipassana retreat, and of course there's a lot of silence, a lot of meditation, she just kept thinking about the stories from that book. They were like haunting her mind. So she said that was a really good lesson for her. So if we would like our mind to be more calm and clear and have more positive thoughts, then we have to be careful about what material comes in. And then number 5 is habit, familiarity or habit. This refers to the fact that the delusions we're most familiar with are those that will arise most easily. So, some people may have a long habit of being angry, going way back to childhood. They may have gotten angry a lot and never did anything to try to manage their anger. And so because of having done it so many times, felt that way, reacted that way so many times, it just comes up easily, quickly and easily. And the same with desire. If we have certain things that we are attached to and we have followed that desire again and again and again, then that one will come up very easily. So that's actually what we're trying to do in meditation. We're trying to develop positive habits. We're trying to generate a positive state of mind, like concentration, loving kindness, compassion, unselfishness, and so on. So we meditate to get into a positive state of mind and then try to make a habit of that, make our minds familiar with that. And gradually that becomes a habit. That becomes what we're most familiar with. That's actually the meaning of the word for meditation in Tibetan language. It's gom. And gom means to be familiar, to make ourselves familiar. So this is one of the ways to work on delusions, is to make our mind more familiar with positive states, the opposite states of mind to the deluded ones, like more love and compassion instead of anger. So the more we familiarize ourselves with the positive, constructive aspects of the mind, then the diluted ones will decrease. And then the last one, number 6, is called unrealistic thinking. It's also called distorted attention. So this is focusing on the object of the delusion and exaggerating it. So, for example, thinking obsessively about someone you're angry at or you're attached to. This causes the delusion to become stronger. So this is probably pretty easy to recognize if we pay attention to our mind. Like when you see somebody, you meet somebody and you find them really attractive, and then afterwards your mind just keeps thinking about that person again and again and again. You can't stop almost thinking about them. And when you're thinking about that person, you're kind of building up this image of the person as being really wonderful, really fantastic, really someone that will make you happy. Maybe even start having fantasies, if we could be together, what joy we will have, what fun we will have, and so on. And so it's kind of like the mind is building up image of that person as being more wonderful than they really are, even 100% fantastic, as if they had no faults at all, and we would experience nothing but happiness with them. And the same thing happens with anger. When we're angry at somebody, we feel angry or annoyed at somebody, our mind also keeps thinking about that person. They just come to mind again and again. And again, there's exaggeration that goes on. Exaggerating the faults, projecting more faults than are really there. And so again, the mind is kind of building up this image of the other person as being really awful, really terrible, really so annoying, so bad. So in that article from Lama Yeshe, he gave an example of how you can do this with one person. He said, like if you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, in the beginning, we exaggerate everything about them, seeing them as really wonderful, really fantastic. Then later, we have a falling out, they do something we don't like, we get annoyed with them, and then our mind starts exaggerating them the other way, how bad they are, how terrible they are, right? So this is, this is just something that happens in our mind. I don't think we do it deliberately or consciously. It's just a kind of involuntary activity that goes on in the mind. But this is something that increases delusions, making delusions stronger. So it's good to try to watch out for it if we notice it happening, and then if we do, to if you don't want that delusion to get stronger, just to put a stop to it, to say, no, stop, I'm not going to think like this, and then focus on something else. Turn your attention to something else. So it's helpful to know about these 6 factors, because if we do wish to work on our mind and decrease our delusions, then working with these factors can help to do that, like being careful about who you spend time with, what kind of TV you watch, and newspapers you read, and so on, and looking out for this pattern of obsessive thinking and exaggerating that happens. So again, from the book Samsara and Nirvana, Buddha and Nature, the Dalai Lama says, the surroundings in which we live may contain many of the objects, detrimental social influences, and verbal stimuli, meaning the sources of information, that trigger our afflictions. For this reason, the great masters advise avoiding environments that trigger our afflictions. So, there's this tradition in Buddhism for meditators to go to solitary places or go to monasteries to try to reduce their likelihood of encountering things that would trigger their afflictions. He says this is done not because those objects or people are bad. It's not that we're saying, oh, I have to get away from these horrible people. They're so bad. They're polluting me. So it's not like that, but rather because we know that our mind is still uncontrolled. We don't know how to control our mind, our afflictions. He says living in an environment where distractions and commotion are minimal enables us to focus on developing counterforces to afflictions. Once these are strong, our external surroundings will not affect us as much. So once you gain familiarity, training in the methods, the antidotes for the afflictions, and you're able to use them, then you can be anywhere. You can be in the middle of a big city, surrounded by a lot of people and commotion and activity, and you will know how to manage your mind so that your mind doesn't get afflicted. But in the beginning, that's hard to do. Okay, so that's kind of a general way of looking at afflictions and the causes and conditions that give rise to them and how to work on those. And then I'm going to give some advice or antidotes for two of the main afflictions, anger and attachment. But before doing that, just to talk in a general way on how to work with delusion. So the second point here is like general advice for working on delusions. So the first point says, avoid the two extremes of suppressing them and acting them out. So this is something I've noticed in myself, but also in others, that when a delusion arises in the mind, we may sometimes suppress it. That's something I do a lot, like kind of denying that it's there, pretending that it's not there, shoving it under the carpet, and just ignoring it and hoping it'll go away by itself. So that doesn't work. That doesn't help. So that's something to be avoided. And then the other extreme is acting them out. So this is like anger comes up in the mind, and then immediately you're acting it out with your speech, swearing, saying harsh words, and so on, or even with your body doing something destructive, harmful. So this is another unskillful response to emotions, and that's not helpful either, because then you can create a lot of harm for other people and harm relationships and so on and so forth. So we should try to avoid those two ways of reacting when a delusion comes up, and there's a kind of middle way between those two, which is to be honest and acknowledge the presence of an affliction, a delusion. So when there's anger in the mind, don't deny it, but accept, oh, there's anger in the mind. But then instead of acting it out, don't act it out, but work on it in meditation. This is, to see the anger as like a topic for meditation, something to focus on and apply antidotes to, and try to change. It's possible to change the mind so that instead of being angry at the other person, you can have a more positive attitude, like kindness, compassion, patience, acceptance. Okay, so changing the mind so that there's something more positive and constructive rather than this deluded state of mind. So that's the ideal way in Buddhism of working with delusions, neither suppressing nor acting out, but acknowledging and then working on the delusion in meditation. Now that's a lot. That's not easy to do. It takes time, but if we gradually train ourselves, then it does get easier. And the second point is cultivate mindfulness and introspective awareness. These are two mental factors. Mindfulness is watching what's happening in our mind, and introspective awareness is like it's a kind of intelligence that is able to detect delusions or whatever's going on in the mind. But introspective awareness is able to recognize that's anger, or that's jealousy, or that's fear, or whatever it is. So those two mental factors are really important to cultivate, and it's something we do in meditation. This is a big part of meditation. Learning to meditate is to become more aware of our mind and be able to recognize the different aspects of the mind, different factors in the mind. So again, it's something that does take time, but it's very worthwhile. Because otherwise we're kind of at the mercy of our mind, like all these emotions popping up and sometimes taking over our mind, and we don't even fully understand what's going on. So with mindfulness and introspective awareness, we can get a handle on our mind and become more in control of our mind rather than being controlled by our mind. We can manage our mind better. And the third point is to remember they're impermanent, like clouds in the sky. So any delusion that pops up in our mind is something impermanent, meaning it's not always there. It comes and goes. And I like this analogy of clouds in the sky because, they're not permanent. They come and go. Sometimes they're very impermanent, just within a few minutes, they're gone. So our mind can be compared to the sky, the vast, spacious sky, and then delusions and all other kinds of thoughts and emotions are like clouds. They come and go, pass through the sky. And that can be a really helpful analogy to not take delusions so seriously and not get so upset about them. So, if you notice anger is there in the mind, you can remind yourself, oh, it's there, but it's not permanent. Yeah, it's something that comes and goes, so it will be gone later. Because if we see them as permanent, then we can get kind of worried, concerned, upset, unhappy. But remembering that they're impermanent, that kind of helps us relax and take it easy. And the second part of that sentence says, learn to de-identify with them. So this is interesting because what normally happens, I think it's just an automatic thing. When a delusion comes up in our mind, we just tend to identify with it. We even say things like, I am angry, I am jealous. Yeah, so there's this habit of identifying with delusions. And when that happens, I think it gives more power, more strength to the delusion, kind of like putting more fuel in the fire so that it's like stronger and maybe lasts longer as well. And it's actually totally incorrect. We are not our delusions. We are not anger. We are not jealousy, and so on. These are just temporary, transitory mental factors that come and go in our mind. They are not who we are. Yeah. So it's good to look at that, to try to recognize if you do have that habit or that tendency to identify with delusion like anger or whatever, and then try to generate a different view. Instead of thinking that is me, I am that, but to see, oh, that's just something that's passing through my mind, a temporary, transitory mental state. It's not me, it's not who I am. So what can be helpful is to even say to yourself something like, instead of saying, I am angry, say, anger is in my mind. So you're kind of having a space, distance from it, rather than we are one and the same. I and anger are one and the same thing. That way of thinking, that way of dealing with it, kind of pumps it up, increases it, gives it more strength. So then you'll probably remain angry longer. But if you can see it as just something in the mind, like a cloud in the sky passing through, not permanent, then it'll probably go away more quickly. So these are all things that may sound easy, but it does take time to learn how to do them, partly because of habit. We've had a long-term habit of identifying with our delusions and even getting caught up in them and acting them out. And so it does take time to learn these different ways. I remember once a woman who was coming to a course I was teaching, and she said that, before she started learning Buddhism, she would get angry all the time, and she wouldn't even realize she was angry until a long time afterwards, like maybe months afterwards. She'd realize, oh, I got really angry. Then she started learning Buddhism and meditation and practicing, and then that period of time started to shrink. So she would start to notice, she'd start to realize she got angry maybe, 2 weeks afterwards, or 1 week afterwards, or 2 days afterwards, 1 day. So her ability to recognize her anger was increasing. And eventually, she said she could recognize it while it was happening. Yeah. So that was an improvement, but it took her a long time to get to that point. Yeah, just to be able to recognize that there's anger, that you're angry. And then if we keep working on that, we can even start to see it coming when it's starting to arise in our mind before it's full blown. We can start to see it coming up, and then we can do something about it so that we can keep it managed rather than, full explosion. So it does take time. So we need patience. And then the next point says, try to avoid guilt and self-criticalness and learn to have self-compassion and forgiveness. So again, this is something that could take time because a lot of people have this habit of feeling guilty and also criticizing themselves, judging themselves, even hating themselves because of their delusions. Like, oh, I'm such a bad person. I'm so selfish. I'm so angry. I'm so full of desire, and then kind of beating yourself up about that. Yeah. So that doesn't help. That kind of attitude doesn't help at all. And if we work on the previous point of, understanding that delusions are impermanent and they're not who we are, if we get really familiar with that way of thinking, then it doesn't make sense to feel guilty and hate ourselves, beat ourselves up, because these are just mental states that come and go, not permanent, not who we are. So getting familiar with those ideas will help us to avoid guilt. And instead of guilt, it's important to have compassion for oneself, kindness and compassion, just as we would have it for a friend. So if there's a friend or a family member who maybe has a bad temper and gets angry, if we care about that person, then, we continue being friendly to them and caring towards them. We don't sort of throw them out and get angry at them, but we care about them and have compassion and forgiveness and try to help them. So if you have an experience like that with a friend or a family member, then think, that's the way I want to be with myself. I want to be kind and compassionate and patient with myself, just as I am with that friend. So again, that may take time, but it's worth working at. It's really important. And the last point there is understand that it takes time to change the mind. So be patient. So even though we may wish to change our mind, to do a complete overhaul of our mind and get rid of all these delusions and have nothing but positive thoughts and feelings, I mean, it's great to have that wish, but it's just not possible to do it quickly. It does take time. And so we need to accept that, acknowledge that, and just keep working on it. The Tibetans have a saying that I like. They say that following negative thoughts, like having negative thoughts and following negative thoughts in the mind, is as easy as pushing a boulder down a hill. Right? So there's a boulder at the top of the hill. You just have to give it a little nudge and then it will go rolling down without any effort at all. But they say when it comes to having positive thoughts, positive states of mind, that's like pushing a boulder up a hill. It's hard work. So this is our Tibetan teachers, the Tibetan heritage. And so they've had the Dharma for many centuries, maybe 1,200 years. And have been working really hard and learning and practicing the Dharma, and this is coming from their experience, their wisdom. So it's so easy to have negative states of mind like anger, but it's hard to have positive states of mind like love and compassion. And the reason for that is they say it's because our mind, from beginningless time, our mind has been around from beginningless time. And most of the time it's been negative. Most of the time we've had these delusions, these negative states of mind. So our mind is just much more familiar with those than it is with the positive states of mind. It's just a question of habit, familiarity. But if in this lifetime, if we make effort to generate compassion and love and forgiveness and patience, these positive qualities, and do that again and again and again, then those will start to become more natural, more easy, more spontaneous. So we're just trying to change the habitual tendencies of our mind. And doing that, I can say, I've been doing this for 50 years, and I can say it does work. Yeah. You just have to be patient and keep working at it. Okay, so those are kind of general points for working with delusion. So now let's look at some antidotes to anger. So these are from the handout that I sent you last week. So I hope you did have a chance to read that. So the first point is to recognize the shortcomings of anger, the faults of anger, because if we're not convinced that anger is harmful, that it does bring problems, then when we find ourselves in a situation, anger's coming up, we're triggered, then we'll just go with it. We'll just go along with it and get angry and act it out. But if we have thought about, if we've heard about, read about, thought about, meditated on the shortcomings of anger, like what's wrong with anger? Why is it harmful? Then that will help us stop ourselves from just getting caught up in it and following it. And so, we can think about the short-term effects, like how it disturbs our body, our mind, our relationships, harms other people, but also the long-term effects, karmically. If we get angry and act out our anger, we're creating negative karma that will bring suffering in the future. And it's also a hindrance to our spiritual practice, to attaining calm abiding and wisdom and compassion, liberation, enlightenment. So just as much information as you can have about the faults, the shortcomings of anger, and just get really acquainted with those. That will help you to have the incentive, the wish to work on anger rather than just following it. And then, okay, the second point is to use wisdom to understand the other person. So most of the time when we're angry, it's at another person, usually a human being. And when we get angry at somebody, I don't know, this is my experience anyway, you can check your experience, but I get kind of really caught up in my perspective, my thoughts, my feelings, what's going on with me. And I don't really think much about the other person. I don't care so much about their point of view, their perspective, what's going on with them. Yeah, it's like I'm more important in this situation, not you. And so you hurt me, you upset me, you did this and that. And, so I'm very caught up in my thoughts and feelings. And so it can be really helpful if you want to work on anger to think about the other person's side of things. And that's why it says here, put yourself in the other person's shoes. Like, try to understand what's going on with the other person. Why are they behaving that way? Yeah, try to understand that. And what you might discover is there's something going on with them. Yeah, they're unhappy. Maybe they're not well. Maybe there's some problem happening in their life with a family member. Yeah, and so their mind is kind of out of sync and out of balance. And so that's why they're behaving the way they are. Or it could be that they just have a lot of afflictions in their mind and they never learned how to manage them. And instead they just have this habit of getting caught up in their afflictions and acting them out, not knowing any better, not knowing any different. So just making an attempt to understand the other person, what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what's going on with them. This can help our mind change towards them, and instead of being angry and hateful, wanting to hurt them, we can even feel compassion and kindness towards them. We can feel the wish to help them rather than harm them. So this is not easy to do, but it's very, very worthwhile if we make an effort to do it. So it's like wisdom and compassion. Wisdom to understand the other person's perspective and point of view and thoughts and feelings, and then have compassion because that person wants to be happy just like we do, and they don't want to suffer just like we do. And maybe, their mind is a little bit crazy, with worries and afflictions, and maybe they're really trying to do the best, but they just don't know any better. So this can be a very helpful way of dealing with anger. And then number 3 is reflect on karma. Think about karma. So if you believe in karma, if you accept karma, karma means, well, one aspect of karma is that whatever experience we have, good or bad, happy or unhappy, is a result of our own actions in the past. And so if we're in a situation where, things aren't going well, someone's mistreating us, this is the kind of situation where we can get angry. So if we think about karma, then we would think, oh, this is happening to me because of karma that I created in the past. Maybe I did exactly the same thing that this person is doing to me. I did that to somebody else. And so this is the karmic boomerang coming back and hitting me in the head. And, we might even be able to remember something in this life. Yeah. Maybe we did something in this life that's similar to what that person is doing to us. So they can think, oh yeah, I did that too. I know what that's like. So now I'm experiencing the karmic results of my own actions. And this is beneficial because then instead of putting all the blame on the other person, we're accepting responsibility for our own karma. And then we can think, okay, now I know what it's like. What are the results? What are the consequences of that kind of behavior? And I don't want to continue having this in the future. I don't want to keep having people mistreat me and so on. And so I have to stop creating the cause for that. I have to clean up my karma, refrain from that kind of behavior, and create virtue, good karma instead. So it's like a lesson, using this situation as a lesson in karma to moving forward, going forward, to really try our best to not create negative karma and instead create virtue. Then it becomes very beneficial. Okay, one more method. This one I really like. I call it the mirror method because it's like other people are mirroring our own attitudes and behavior. And so if there's somebody doing something you don't like and you find it wrong, harmful, unacceptable, or whatever, it's good to check if that is something in yourself. Have you ever behaved that way? Or even if you haven't behaved that way, maybe within your mind, you have the tendency to behave that way. You have sort of the thought, the impulse to behave that way. You could do it, but you don't let yourself do it. So the reasoning behind this is that when we feel annoyed, angry, judgmental, critical towards another person for something that they do or some attitude we see in them. So if that triggers our aversion, then it's most probably something we have in ourself that we don't like, that we don't accept, that we find unacceptable. And so because we don't like it in ourselves, then when we see it in the other person, we also don't like it. We also feel angry, annoyed, irritated. And so the solution there is to, recognize, yeah, I have that too. And then come to an attitude of acceptance. Acceptance here doesn't mean saying, oh, it's okay to be that way. I can be that way all I want. But rather just to accept, to acknowledge that I do have that quality. I have behaved that way myself in the past. And so that's something in myself as well. And I want to work on it. I do see it as something unwholesome, something I would like to work on. But, in the meantime, I'm accepting it, acknowledging it. So if we can become more accepting of that in ourselves, less likely to be critical and judgmental and hateful, then when we see the other person or some other person behaving that way too, we won't be so agitated. It's like we'll have more understanding, more compassion, more patience with them rather than anger and judgmentalness. So these are just a few. There's many other methods, antidotes to anger. These are just a few. In fact, there are whole books written on anger. One is called Healing Anger by the Dalai Lama. He was teaching the 6th chapter of Shantideva's Engaging in Bodhisattva Deeds. So that's a book with lots of advice on anger. There's a book called Working with Anger by Venerable Toten Chudran. It's also based on Shantideva. I've seen a book called Anger by Thich Nhat Hanh. I haven't read it, but my guess is that it's also helpful advice on working with anger. So if anger is something you have and want to work on, there's lots of material, lots of different antidotes. And I think it's good to have different antidotes because, you might try one. If you're struggling with anger, you might try one antidote and it doesn't work. And so it's good to have a few others that you can try, and hopefully you'll eventually find one that does work, that does help you. Okay, then attachment. So again, there's a lot of different antidotes, but here's just a few, starting with recognize its shortcomings. So just to see that attachment is not helpful. It makes our mind disturbed, even crazy sometimes. The mind can just get crazy with attachment, with desire. And if we have strong desire and attachment, then it can lead to disappointment. If we don't get what we want something really, really bad, and then we don't get it, then we can really suffer with disappointment or sadness. But even if we do manage to get what we want, how long will we remain happy and satisfied with it before we get bored and dissatisfied and then want something else, something bigger, something better, something more? So the Buddha said attachment never leads to satisfaction. It's like drinking salt water. It just makes us more thirsty. We have more desire, more attachment. And also, attachment can lead to other disturbing emotions, like anger. When we have strong attachment to someone or something, then we're likely to get angry at anyone or anything that's threatening our object of attachment or harming our object of attachment. So it can lead to anger, it can lead to jealousy. Jealousy is actually based on attachment. I want that, and I don't have it, and that person has it, and it's just like unbearable. I can't bear the fact that they have it and not me, or they have more than me, better than me. The jealousy is really painful. So it's based on attachment. So, and then the long-term effects, it's one of the main factors keeping us in samsara, preventing us from attaining liberation and enlightenment. So if we really want to progress on the path and attain those higher states, we need to overcome attachment. So we need to develop that conviction that attachment is something harmful, something we want to overcome. And then what to do about it, reflect on impermanence. So the impermanent nature of whatever it is we're attached to, it's not going to be there forever. Yeah, it's changing, goes through changes, and eventually it will go out of existence. And if the more attachment we have, the more we'll suffer when that object or that person does change, does go out of existence. So yeah, it's good to, and we have to understand the difference between attachment and love. This is a place where people often get confused. Some people mix the two. Attachment and love are one and the same thing. I think actually this came up in last week or the week before. But anyway, I'll mention it again. So love is caring for the other person. We see the other person as dear and precious, and yeah, we want to care for them. We want to make them happy. So we're more focused on the other person. Whereas attachment is more focused on me, my happiness, what's good for me. And it's almost like we're using the other person to get our own happiness. We see the other person as a source of happiness for me. And that's why when the other person doesn't live up to our expectations, we get angry at them. If we had nothing but love, we wouldn't be angry. But if we think the person is there to make me happy, and then they don't make me happy, yeah, then we get angry at them. So So it's good to look at our mind and check who are we caring about in this situation? Is it more about me or more about the other person? And then try to work on decreasing the attachment, which is self-centered, and increase the love, which is focused on the other person. But yeah, impermanence is very helpful just to get more familiar with the changing nature of things. Nothing is permanent in our life, in our world. People, things, our own body, our own life, all these things are impermanent. And then the third one is, I call it doing a reality check and cultivate a balanced view. So when we have attachment, if you recall in the sixth of the six factors that cause delusions, the sixth one is distorted attention or unrealistic thinking. So that's where we exaggerate the object. So in the case of attachment, our mind exaggerates the good qualities of the object, and we build up the image of the other person or the object as being just 100% wonderful, fantastic, beautiful, perfect, whatever. And it's just not true. Nobody's that wonderful. There's always some faults there. And so it's good to try to recognize when that's happening, when our mind is fantasizing, exaggerating, projecting, and then, stop that mental activity and then just think, yeah, okay, the person does have some good qualities, but they also have some faults. They're not 100% perfect. And the same with any material object that we might get attached to, like a beautiful new car. You're thinking about all the wonderful things about this car and all the fun you're going to have in this car. But it's good to also think about the expenses, yeah, when you have to have it repaired. And then, and over time, it will start to wear down, get scratched, and maybe get stolen. So having expensive car isn't necessarily 100% happiness all the time. There are worries, there are problems. So just to be more realistic, just to have a more realistic view of the object and the situation so that we're not lost in fantasies. So that's just a quick overview of some methods for working on the two main afflictions of anger and attachment. And other afflictions like jealousy are sort of branches. Jealousy is actually a combination of attachment and anger or hatred. And so if we already know something about attachment and anger, then that will help us deal with jealousy as well. So there's a lot more that could be said about this topic, but we have limited time. So I'll stop there, and we have a bit of time left if you would like to ask a question related to this talk.
I have a question, Venerable.
Sorry?
I have a question. This is more of
Yeah.
technical question. Could you explain the difference between seeds and latencies?
Well, I think they're the same. I think it's just two different terms for the same thing. Yeah. So sometimes they're called seeds, sometimes they're called latencies. If you have the book, I don't know if you have the book Samsara and Nirvana, Buddha Nature. Do you have that book? Volume 3 of the
Yeah, I think so. I have to look.
Library of Wisdom and Compassion. You have
Yeah.
that book?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
There is in there's a whole section on the, not like a whole chapter, but within one of the chapters. If you look in the table of contents, you'll see seeds, latencies.
Okay.
I can't remember exactly what it says in there, but if you look in there, that'll
Okay.
explain
I'll
it.
check.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
is a little complicated, a little technical. Yeah. Asha?
Hello, Venerable. Thank you for the teachings. So my question is, some things, I mean, many things in life are like necessary, right? Necessary for us to continue the life, necessary for us to fulfill our responsibilities towards ourselves, family, children, and so on and so forth. So, so those necessities, we get attached to them because they are critical for fulfilling our responsibilities. But when those necessities are threatened, then all these disturbing emotions come up. So I realized that at that time we are attached to that particular necessity, but it's a necessity. It needs to be there. I cannot detach myself from it. How can I have a balanced view in such a situation?
Yeah, I mean, strictly speaking, this teaching on the afflictions and the need to overcome all the afflictions, like attachment and especially attachment, I think this was intended for Buddha's disciples who were monastics and who didn't have, I mean, they left behind the household life and just decided to lead a life where they could just focus themselves completely on their practice. And they would have just simple things, the robes and the bowl and, a few personal items, but that was it. And they would live in the forest. So they didn't have a lot of things to be attached to, but you can still be attached. Even if you have just a few things, you can still be attached. But then they would have a lot of time, the whole day, whole night to practice, to meditate and overcome their afflictions. So it is much more difficult, this kind of work, for those who, the traditional term is householders, meaning, yeah, you have a home, you have a family, you have work, you have property, and so on. It is much harder, but it's not impossible. And, within the life of a householder, it's certainly possible to work on the afflictions and reduce attachment. I guess the main thing for householders the Buddha taught was like ethical conduct, like keeping the 5 precepts and trying not to have anger and attachment and so on. But it is difficult, like you say, if you have a family and you need your car to take your kids to school and take yourself to work and so on. And if somebody steals your car, then it's a big hardship. I mean, that's a big deal. And so we just try our best to work on our mind and not have too much attachment. If attachment does arise, then we just, work with that. But yeah, if somebody steals your car, you need to find a way to get it back or get it replaced or whatever. So it does become kind of a big problem. So yeah, I think in such a life where you have to work and you have a family to take care of and other family members to take care of and so on, you just have to just practice the best you can. And then you may have the wish, you could think, in the future, I hope that I will have more time to devote to practice and really work on my mind, work on these afflictions. Does that make
Mm.
sense?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and through the meditations, it certainly helps, at least when that does arise, that even just recognizing it, that has been helpful. At least I may not have a solution how I detach myself from it, but just even realizing, hey, it looks like this is a kind of attachment.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Thank you.
Have lots of opportunities to recognize other
Yes.
in our mind, and And just to recognize, oh yeah, this is what the Buddha was talking about. This is one of the things that keeps me in samsara. And I really want to work on it, and I will do my best within whatever situation you have, whatever limitations you have, just do the best you can. Because even for monastics, yeah, even if like those of us who are monastics, we still have issues coming up with, attachment and anger and so on. So it's not like there's no perfect life, perfect situation where you won't have these coming up. And when they do come up, then that gives us an opportunity to recognize, like you say, recognize these states of mind and how disturbing they are. And you can also turn that into a meditation on compassion, just to think, oh yeah, all the sentient beings, everybody has this state of mind. And now I can see so clearly how disturbing it is, how painful it is. And probably most people don't have any remedies. They don't have any solution. They don't know how to work on their mind and change their mind. And then realize how fortunate you are that you do have access to teachings and teachers to help you to work on these painful states of mind, and then feel the wish to do it for the benefit not just of yourself but others as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep, yep. I think that's helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I thought there would be lots of questions because I've been giving you so much information. Yes, Datura?
Hi. I think I'm looking for advice. So one of the strong attachments or afflictions that I have is a food disorder. And so I'm realizing that I have many opportunities every day to kind of look at the views and perceptions that I've created around food, from past experiences that probably served me when I was a young child, but no longer serve me and are harmful. And I've read a lot. I love to research, but I'm wondering if you have any advice on any particular practices that could be useful, since it comes up so often.
Practices for food disorder, eating disorders?
Yeah, just the attachments, the unhealthy attachments around food.
Hmm. In our tradition, I can't think of anything, but I recall there's a teacher named Jan Chosen Bays. She's a Zen teacher in Oregon, and I think she wrote a book. She wrote a book about, I don't remember the title, but you might Google her name. It was something to do with mindfulness and eating. There may be other books as well that I am not aware of, but yeah, let me just see if I can find it here. Oh yeah, here it is. It's called Mindful Eating. Oh, there's also a course. There's a book, a book and a course. Yeah. So the book is called Mindful Eating, a guide to rediscovering a healthy and joyful relationship with food. Yeah.
Okay.
Jan Chosen Bays, and yeah, it comes with a CD as well. So that's one book. There may be others as well. Yeah, I can see on Amazon. Others, yeah, similar books. But I know Jan Chosen Bays. I met her many years ago. Wonderful teacher. So I think that would be a good place to go to.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have just one more week, next week, and I thought that we could look at the 12 links of dependent arising. It's kind of a difficult topic, but I'll try to treat it in a simple way. And so for next week, it'll be on this file that we were just going through. Tyler will send that to you. So there's a little suggested homework meditation. You could choose one of those 2 delusions that we just looked at, anger, attachment, and then spend some time working on that, applying antidotes. Then for the reading, there's some pages in Liberation in the Palm of the Hand, Wish Fulfilling Golden Sun, and also a handout that Tyler will send you. It's from my newest book called Meditation, what is it called? How to Meditate on the Stages of the Path. So there's a section in there on the 12 links and how to meditate on the 12 links. So just to be prepared for next week. So we'll go through the 12 links and then just finish up any remaining points on this topic that we haven't covered yet. Okay, so we'll stop there, and we have dedication prayers to dedicate the merit, positive energy we've created. So feel a sense of joy, rejoicing that you spent this time looking at this very important topic of how to work on our mind, reduce the disturbing emotions, the delusions, and increase the positive aspects of the mind. So this is a good thing to do for ourselves and also for others. So let's share the merit, the positive energy that we've created with all other people, all other beings, wishing that it will bring them peace and happiness, well-being, and eventually, ultimately, enlightenment. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. Incomparably kind and supreme Tenzin Gyatso, the wish-fulfilling, wish-granting jewel, source of every benefit and happiness in this world, may you have a long life and all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Patient in bearing the hardships of spreading the teachings of the Muni in general and the teachings of the victorious Jamgon in hundreds of directions, Lord of Dharma, holding the 3 vows and wearing saffron robes, please return quickly as the glory of the peerless teachings. Okay, so thank you for joining. Thank you, Tyler, for facilitating.
Thank you.
Well, and see you
Thank you, very Khadro. Thank you, Tyler.
You're welcome,
Thank you,
everybody.
Venerable.
Welcome,
Thank
Venerable.
you.
Bye-bye.
Have a good
Bye.
evening. I'll be
Bye-bye.
emailing you all shortly.